Hi, I'm DM Gallibond, and last week at the table, we look at what happened in the 3 actual play games I run on my Twitch channel, which you can find at twitch.tv/Gallibond. Let's get on with the show. On Thursday night, we were playing the Essentials game at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Last week, we continued the visit to the gnomes at Gnomengard. Abenadam, Dorzafir, and Finn learned all about some of the strange, wacky, and sometimes whimsical inventions that the gnomes make, and they learned that one of their goals is to open retail outlets in the major cities of the Sword Coast so that they can earn profit. The party ate a dinner of mushroom meat, drank mushroom wine, and they learned that the soil of the area was subjected to extremely powerful wild magic long, long ago, perhaps 1,000 years or more ago. Eventually, they secured an audience with King Korbaz, who made a dramatic entrance to the throne room, accompanied by smoke and lights. He told the party that Gnomengard has a monster problem of its own. 2 of its residents recently disappeared, and King Korbaz was recently attacked by a carpet. The adventurers searched their memories, some excellent history rolls there, and all of them realized the gnomes were dealing with a mimic. The king is fearful for himself and his husband, King Nurgle, so they have become virtual shut-ins in their chambers, only coming out to speak to adventurers. When King Korbaz learned the party had come with both a warning and a request for aid against the White Dragon, the king said he would ask his people to aid the adventurers if they could address the monster problem here in Gnomengard. During their interaction, King Korbaz cast a spell, and butterfly wings sprang from his back, which he found most amusing. The party had some successful arcana checks, and they determined that this was the effect of the wild magic, probably the same that had affected the soil of the place long ago, and might be responsible for those oversized mushrooms. The party were guided around the citadel and spent over an hour poking around in every nook and cranny. Eventually they reached the vintners, where the purple mushrooms are juiced and the barrels for aging the mushroom wine are stored. The inventory said there should be 11 barrels here, but there were 12. As the vintner was going around counting barrels, one suddenly leaped off its stand and tried to attack him. The party leaped into action, and between the use of spells and weapon attacks they managed to slay it. As a result of their casting, Dorzafir also sprouted butterfly wings. Abenadam got covered in spots the same colors as the mushroom, red, green, and purple, and they erupted in harmless sparks of light. Finn suffered no side effects from the wild magic. We ran out of time for the session here. Since the combat of the encounter is over, I told the group who attended to level up to level 4 for next week. We will wrap up the Gnomengard visit to see what magical items the gnomes may have that could help the party deal with the dragon. On Saturdays at noon, it's the history of D&D. Last time was session 15 of the campaign, and the table was a little light. Only LC and Mark were able to play. The original D&D rules are such that even wildly outnumbered fights like 2 PCs and a couple of henchmen against a small army of kobolds is a balanced fight. I knew that Siren had a sleep spell in reserve, so the fight only hinged on the kobolds bunching up so he could use it. Kobolds are not terribly brilliant tacticians, preferring to rush an opponent and attempting to overwhelm them with sheer numbers, firing their bows as they close. Aethert was hit, and he fell in the battle, but Gallus was able to drag him to safety and apply some healing to get him back on his feet. Within about 3 rounds, the 8 kobolds left standing were all within range of Siren's spell, so he cast it, and that ended the battle without further bloodshed. They left a single kobold alive, and they questioned him. He told them his name is Ukra, and he gave them some useful information about the lair. Bargle has invited an entire tribe of kobolds to live there and defend the place. The Master, as they call Bargle, also has undead monsters roaming the place as guardians or servants. Ukra doesn't know which. He just knows the Master says not to go to certain places, and the undead, which he calls stinky, not dead things, are in those places. The kobold also does not personally know any other ways out of the lair, but he does know that the master comes and goes and doesn't always use the exit the kobolds are aware of. Apparently the master's lair is on a lower level of the complex. Ukra offered the party treasure if they spared his life, and they eventually decided to take him back to Dale as a prisoner. The treasure was 100 gold pieces and a black onyx gem that they have not yet had appraised. Back in the village, the council put Ukra in the same cell block as Lareth. They are also expecting a force from the capital in 3 days to take the prisoner Lareth to the capital for interrogation. The village council was happy with the intelligence the PCs were able to bring back on Bargle's lair, so they paid the PCs the agreed upon sum of 500 gold pieces each. The next 2 days in Adale were kind of quiet. None of the PCs had any pressing downtime things they wanted to do, so we jumped forward to the night before the soldiers from the capital were due to arrive. The PCs awoke to the smell of smoke in the inn. They looked out the window and saw that the townmaster's hall was on fire. This is where the village council meets and has the cell block with the prisoners Lareth and Ukra, where the cell block with the prisoners Lareth and Ukra are being held. We had a skills challenge with rules modified for original D&D. Now, skills challenges were a thing formally in 4th edition, and they're used masterfully by Rodrigo Lopez, the DM for the long-running Major Spoilers vehicle, Critical Hit. The goal of the skills challenge in our game on Saturday was to raise an alarm in the village and keep the prisoners from escaping and save anyone from the burning building. Outside they saw in the shadows black-clad shapes that seemed to be involved in setting the townmaster's hall on fire. Success would mean they captured some of the arsonists and prevented any escapes before a rather easy fight. Failure would mean that at least some of the prisoners got away, and there would be a tough fight for the party. I used the 1st edition skills, and I allowed the skills to be used as an ability checks if the PCs didn't have any skill points in them. And just as with Rodrigo rules that I use in my 5e games, I required the PCs to rotate skills so that there are always 2 they can't use in any given turn. And those 2 are the skill that they used the last turn and the skill that the player used just before them in the current round. So winning the challenge meant getting 8 successes before 4 failures, and the party were doing really well until Siren had a critical failure, which meant that after only 6 successes the party got their 4th failure. That meant the fight would be a bit more tough. Only 4 guards and 3 named NPCs, those being Zert, Elmo, and Tuck, were roused at the end of the skills challenge, and they found themselves with the 2 PCs facing off against 9 of the black-clad arsonists and Lareth himself. The cultish cleric had lost his staff, had lost his armor, and had lost his armband, but he had a holy symbol again, and that probably meant that he had his spells. The fight looked like it was going to be a tough one, but Trophim used a sleep spell to disable the arsonists, and then Tuck, who's a cleric of St. Cuthbert, used Hold Person to take Lareth out of the fight. Now, without Lareth's fancy armband, he was just as helpless against the cleric spell as anyone else would be. So the fight was ended with the heroes victorious. There will be lots of XP to split up with 3 encounters in the game, even if one of them didn't go exactly as the party hoped. And we ran out of time for the session after that. Now, on Sundays at 2:30 p.m., we play The Walker of Waterdeep. That's a 5e D&D game where we cross the streams of lore between D&D 5e and Magic the Gathering. There was a lot of cleanup after the big battle in the last session, and a few tense moments as Oranax the dragon laid down an edict that any remaining kobolds in the mine must die. As the albino dwarves broke up into work parties to begin assessing the road ahead for them to recover their home and rebuild, the party was recruited to help. Arnax asked Gallibond to go with the warriors to deal with any lingering threats. He asked Thardrum and Oyahusa to go with the scouts and find out where the Githyanki patrol routes around the surface of the mine may lead, and how the dwarves might create defenses against future incursions. The dragon also asked Adamant to go with the healers to tend the slaves, and he finally asked Xandri to stay near him and near the dwarven elders, who are the leaders of their community. The warriors and healers decided to go together, and they found that kobolds were being enslaved right along with the humans and the dwarves. All of the slaves, regardless of race, were malnourished, exhausted, and showed signs of untreated wounds, untreated injuries, and disease that the brutal Githyanki had done nothing to treat or heal. The dwarves were ready to brutally slay the helpless kobolds as the dragon had ordered, but Adamant and Galabar both stood united against such vile treatment, and they persuaded the dwarves to stay their hand until Oranax could be told of the issue. The dwarves reluctantly agreed, fearing the dragon's wrath lest his word not be followed to the letter, and they refused to be the ones to tell the dragon that his orders were being questioned. Meanwhile, Oyahusa and Thardrum accompanied the scouts. They found an enormous teleportation circle not far away from the entry to the mine that they theorized was used for transporting cargo to and from the area to other bases far, far away. Now, when I say enormous, I mean it was 25 feet in diameter, so it certainly looked like a place that you could put a lot of cargo or large items that you might be carrying out of the mine or bringing here to take into the mine. And less than a mile away from the teleportation circle, they found a clearing containing a dry dock wharf where the Githyanki flying ships could land and offload people and smaller cargo. Under the direction of the PCs, the dwarves quickly defaced the runes and ruined the magic of the teleportation circle, and they dismantled most of the dry dock, making plans to construct clever traps and siege weapons to defend the area around the mine if the Githyanki ever decided to return. Meanwhile, Xandri discovered that the dwarves took the word of the dragon to mean that Xandri was to be their new leader and the right-hand lieutenant of Aranax himself. Thus they seemed to think that they required her approval and advice on all their plans, and there was so much bowing and scraping going on that even she started to feel a little self-conscious about it all. Well, Adamant recruited some of the warriors and healers to help him bring supplies up to the slaves from the stores so that they could be fed and have their wounds and sicknesses healed. He also shouldered the burden of telling Aranax the news that they had decided not to kill the kobolds after all, finding them in the same pathetic condition as the other slaves. But before they could make their way down to the lower level, something collapsed, and a dwarf down in the main chamber, along with the leaders of the community, was crushed under falling stones and debris. He lay unmoving as a pool of blood grew under his body, and as his friends removed the debris from him, they saw his skull was mashed and misshapen, and one of his arms was bent at a sickeningly wrong angle from what it should be. In that moment, Xandri heard a woman's voice in her head call her daughter and command her to go to the fallen dwarf. As she approached, she felt a warmth growing in her hands and saw a warm crimson glow play about her fingers. She fingered her holy symbol of Sune, and then after uttering a quick prayer of help for the injured dwarf, she touched him. Power flowed through Xandri and nearly burned her and froze her at the same time. The fallen dwarf bolted upright, his injuries all completely healed down to the last scrape and bruise, and in that instant he fell to his face before Xandri and offered himself into her service. Xandri was stunned, and even more stunned when she looked around to see the other dwarves all fallen to their knees and bowed before her as though before some deity that had appeared in their midst. The moment of uncertainty and awe was only broken when Aronnax, after casting a keen and discerning eye at Xandri, broke into a smile and then began chuckling and then laughing, his mirth echoing up to fill the entire upper levels of the mine where the others were found. It turned out that his laughter was relief, as he had been sensing a great change coming for the members of the party, and Xandri's, he felt, would be coming before the others. And the dragon had feared that this meant that all of them would be in grave danger. But now he realized that at least in Xandri's case, the change was being offered through the higher power that she follows. And Xandri was not the only one to experience a change. Gallibond tossed and groaned painfully in his sleep that night, and he even got to his feet, still asleep, and stumbled towards the dragon's lair. Xandri and the other heroes started trying to pull him back, and they noticed that his skin was covered with fine silver scales, and that his skin had also grown icy cold to the touch. The commotion roused Aronnax from his slumber, and he came to look at the sleepwalking half-orc with a great deal of curiosity. As the dragon neared, Gallibond finally awoke, and he looked at the scales on his skin in a bit of a panic. He shivered and he broke out in a cold sweat all at the same time, and after a sniff or two, Aronnax confirmed that the scales were proof of draconic blood in Gallibard's veins. Suddenly something clicked in the half-orc's mind, and he finally realized why a silver dragonborn noble would take such an interest in sponsoring a half-orc gladiator fighter. Using his sending stones, he confirmed that indeed his sponsor is his mother. And then Thardrum had a revelation to Adamant. Instead of feeling honored, he has been feeling increasingly an overwhelming sense of burden and obligation ever since Aronnax gave him Moradin's gauntlet. He really felt like he was not the dwarf to keep it, and he thought it would be better off in the hands of the clergy of Moradin. So he gave it to Adamant, and then he ran away before Adamant could try to shove it back in his hands, and Thardrum dived into his bedroll and went to sleep, while the Warforged was left feeling both a bit miffed and extremely confused. Now, it should be noted that in our game, I solicited ideas from the players several months ago about what a scaling item would look like. Would they want armor, would they want a weapon, or would they want some other kind of item? Now, 4 of my players responded to me, but Thardrum's player never did. So I was left to guess at what might be an appropriate item for him. And it turns out that actually giving him an item was just the kick in the ass that he needed to start coming up with ideas about something that would be appropriate for his character. And the idea that he has pitched me is really pretty amazing. I must confess, I really like it. So he and I worked out between sessions how he was going to deal with the gauntlet, and it was a little joke between us that's being played out now on the rest of the players. Another day or so later, Oyahusa received a sending from the Black Staff indicating that the party should get ready because she was on her way. She asked him to inform the dragon so he wouldn't be startled by her arrival via teleportation. When Vajra arrived, she produced 3 small chests as tokens and gifts for Aronnax, along with a message from Lady Silverhand and the Masked Lords that they have made it illegal for any leader in Waterdeep to subject a metallic dragon to a binding oath ever again. They don't want anyone else to ever be able to repeat what they see as the underhanded and deceitful tactics that Lord Neverember used to coerce to coerce Aronnax into being a guardian for a treasure that he essentially stole from the city coffers through embezzlement. Now, back in Waterdeep, the party were guests at a dinner given by Lady Silverhand. She and the other allies of the party, along with the leaders of the city, informed the heroes that they had confirmed the presence of a shield constructed by the Githyanki over a portion of a high central plateau in the continent of Aussie. This shield acts similar to a Leomund's tiny hut, but on the scale the size of a city like Waterdeep. And the shield makes it impervious to magic or at least magic that's available on this plane. So that means someone has to go to other planes and find components needed to construct a drill rig that can be used to breach the shield. Of course, the party are being sent on this mission. Their first stop will be Ravnica, where they will receive training, equipment, and assistance getting to the next destination, where they need to go to find the first component for the drill to breach the Githyanki shield. So the party set off on their own errands after that. Xandri wanted to return to the Temple of Sune to find out if anyone could explain what had happened to her, and Adamant wanted to go to the Temple of Moradin to deal with the gauntlet problem. Gallibond also wanted to go to Moradin's temple, but Thardrum did not want to go. He had not allowed Adamant to give back the gauntlet, so he reasoned that he didn't need to go, and he decided to go with Xandri to the Temple of Sune. Oyahus had decided that he should probably go with Thardrum to keep an eye on the dwarf and be sure that he was okay, because he was not alone among the other party members in thinking the dwarf was acting very strangely. The high priest of Moradin was shocked and amazed to see the gauntlet returned. As a cleric of Moradin, Adamant had done an identification and had learned that the gauntlet was indeed the fabled gauntlet of Moradin from the Forge of Creation. And the gauntlet had gone missing because the gnome god Garl Glittergold had stolen it, or rather he had borrowed it without asking, and then he had misplaced it as gnomes are wont to do. So the gauntlet had passed through numerous hands before coming to the ancient dwarves that brought it to Hrakamar and placed it in their treasure vault for safekeeping until such time as it might be needed again. So the clergy at the Temple of Moradin were sympathetic to Thardrum's plight, much to Adamant's chagrin. They believed that if his heart told him that the best place for the gauntlet was in Moradin's temple, then they trusted that it was a message from the god himself, and they agreed, as Adamant had told Thardrum earlier, that if Moradin really wants the dwarf to have the gauntlet, then he won't be able to get rid of it. So meanwhile, Gallibond looked into the glove weapons he had commissioned before they left Waterdeep for Chult, and they told him that they could make him a pair of something called dwarven shavers. Now these are magical fist weapons that have small blades built into the backs of the knuckles. They will cost 2,000 gold pieces to make, and they function as +2 weapons and silver weapons all at once. And that's because silver is worked into the blades of these. They also give an unarmed strike the ability to deal 1d3 damage in addition to the +2 magic bonus and any strength bonus. Finally, at the Temple of Sune, preparations were underway for some kind of momentous occasion, and as Xandri approached, both Thardrum and Oyahus noticed that people were looking at them and pointing excitedly towards Xandri, and that several people ran inside the temple as if to tell the priests. Then the huge main doors of the temple opened as the party reached the steps, and the high priest of Sune stepped out, flanked by 2 paladins on her right and 2 clerics, including Silkala, on her left. They all wore expressions of joy and excitement. The high priest told Xandri that all the clergy had had the same dream the night before, which was that Xandri was returning to the temple and that she was to be ordained. They all knew that that had to be some omen from Sune, but they were all puzzled, for the dream never mentioned which ordination she was to receive, that of an adventuring cleric, an adventuring paladin, or a scholarly cleric that is to work in the temple. They decided that they should prepare for the ordination as though they knew, and they trusted that Sune would give them some kind of guidance as they needed it. The next day, once the preparations were complete and the party was all gathered, the ordination began. It was just like any other ordination to begin, but in the middle of it, Xandri's double-bladed scimitar began to glow and rose into the air of its own, crackling with energy. Furthermore, the large statue of Sune in the temple animated, and it held out its hands, palms up, and the weapon floated over to it, so that the statue was holding the weapon outstretched just in front of Xandri. Then the high priest seemed to channel a distant but powerful voice, which pronounced Xandri would be the first of a new line of servants of the goddess, a Justicar. When Xandri picked up the weapon, power from the goddess flowed through her, and she gained her 6th character level. But she is no longer a warrior slash paladin 5/1 as she had originally planned. Due to the special homebrew elements in this campaign, she is now a level 6 Justicar, which combines features from both the warrior and the paladin classes. Now in this game we are building custom classes that retain the same number of feature slots at each level, and I'm allowing the players to select features from up to 3 classes in a 60-30-10 ratio. So about 60% of one main class, about 30% of a second main class, and then up to 10% of a third class. And if they skip a feature in a class that they really, really want, they can slot that in at a higher level than the one pure class would normally get it. So, for example, if you're a feature, or if you have Paladin and Warrior, like Xandri does, and there's a feature, let's say, at 2nd level, you decide that the features of the Paladin are too good, you want to take those, but you kind of like that 2nd level feature that the Warrior has. Well, then at a later level, like 3rd level, 4th level, 5th level, if you have an open slot available, you can go back and take that 2nd level fighter power and slot it in to that place within your build of your character. So that's one of the things that we're trying to do. Now, because you're able to combine features of the classes in this way, it does slightly raise the power curve of these characters, and I think that's going to be necessary as they start venturing into planes where the enemies are inspired by Magic the Gathering creatures. Because as I've been looking at it, the mana cost and power toughness conversion to spell level and CR means that the power curve of Magic the Gathering is closer to 3E or 4E D&D than it is to 5E D&D. So the enemies that they fight are going to be a little bit tougher in terms of CR than enemies that they would normally be fighting in the D&D campaign. So Xandri is the first character to undergo this kind of transformation from one class to another, and all the others will get the same chance if they choose to take it. So that's where we left the session as we ran out of time. Then, as you can tell, that was a really busy session. Next week, we will pick up with shopping in Waterdeep ahead of the arrival of the Ravnikins, who will take them to their home plane. And that's last week at the table for February 11th. Tune in on Twitch on Thursday nights, Saturdays at noon, and Sunday afternoons to see what happens in the live games. Or keep posted here on YouTube to find out what happened last week at our table. And remember to always try to make your games memorable so you can have tales from your table to share with your friends. Good night, everyone.